that they can get more degrees and higher education degrees. So it's cool.
Let me quickly run and do one last tech thing,
Sure.
but I'll be right back, okay?
All right.
Is it because it's shut off? That's just to show you two. There's nothing to do that, like I'm talking to your
Showing?
Yes, it is. Right? I think they're starting to look. Okay.
Just needed to wake up.
Can you put it on?
Yep. And look at how far the delay is.
It's a delay. Okay, Marcus, I think we are getting ready to get started. We have we will get there. Okay, I'm gonna pin you as the main speaker. Fantastic. Okay, and then I'll mute myself in just a moment. All right, everyone. You ready to begin?
I am. Can everybody hear me?
It's a delay.
I mean, can they hear us?
We are getting ready. There'll be a delay for you guys, but we'll get there. Okay. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
I'm gonna pin you. So, everyone, we are so delighted to welcome our featured artist of today, Marcus Dunn. He is joining us here from North Carolina and is a featured artist in the South Arts exhibition on view at the Hilliard. So I know many of us are tuning in remotely today, but I encourage us all to come stop by and see these wonderful paintings that we have by Marcus with us. So just briefly, as I said, Marcus is from North Carolina. He earned his MFA in painting from the Savannah College of Art and Design and a BFA in studio art at the Institute of American Indian Arts. And so he's pulled some images today from various works that he has. And I guess you'll be taking us through some of the process, your research, your creative process, your research process. And we really look forward to spending time with you. So thank you, Marcus.
Thank you. I have my PowerPoint pulled up. Do you know how to screen share or share screen? I can't hear you, Kelly.
Okay, so try sharing, Marcus, and then I can give you permission to sign in.
Yeah, I don't know how to do that. Oh, I see.
Okay, at the bottom, there's like a share screen.
Okay,
it's like a little green arrow.
Disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I know we're having to migrate because we had a lot of feedback. You're totally fine.
No, it's cool. It's cool.
All right, let's see. Okay, that's weird. You should be able. Okay, let's try that again. I should be able to get where you can share.
I see it now.
Perfect, awesome.
Is that okay? That look fine to y'all?
And yeah, and then maybe put it in present mode.
Yeah. Is this okay?
Yes, that looks awesome.
Okay. Okay, great. All right. I guess I can go ahead and talk a little bit about the work. Well, before talking about the work, I want to explain a little bit about my practice. So I'm a painter. I've pretty much been painting since been what 15 years or so. I started painting when I was at IA, and I didn't really want to do painting because I was always kind of afraid of diving into doing anything with color. Really, I'd only throughout high school, I guess. I never really took art classes, but I did take one, and all I did was just did drawings in there. So I've always liked charcoal drawing and pencil drawing. And when I was at IAI in New Mexico for undergrad, I had some teachers that were really influential for me and were good mentors. So it was there where I picked it up and just fell in love with it. I fell in love with the active process of being in the studio and being able to really kind of lose myself with the medium. I never had experienced that kind of thing. But I think before that, like anytime I had made work, it had been like, it's been a little bit here, a little bit there to kind of work on something, but I never felt like it was like I wouldn't call it performative when you're working, but there's some type of reaction that your body and your mind are kind of working in unison, and you just kind of like you can kind of lose yourself in the process of making. And I feel like a big part of me feels like that's what art is all about, is that whole experience. That's why we have jobs and such fields like art therapy, because it's a form of being able to let go of certain things that you keep bottled up inside. I'm the kind of person that keeps a lot of stuff to myself, and through art, I'm able to share some of that with everyone. So that kind of in a nutshell is why I like to make work. And then the work that I make is in response to my own heritage, my interest in the figure. It relates to my interest in also like studying history and trying to get a grasp on the tumultuous past of history, particularly American history and American Indian history. So I've been approaching this kind of work for a while, and so these images that you see are some of the early works that I started making when I was doing when I was first approaching some of the subjects about American Indian boarding schools. I found a lot of archive photos, all black and white photos, because this was like late 1800s, early 1900s when these schools were going on, but they lasted for over 100 years up until the 70s. And I was really interested in what was going on as far as like how these individuals were portrayed, how truthful they were of who they were. And even though a photograph kind of like it's only a snapshot of just a very small speck of someone's livelihood. It just shows one moment in time. It can reveal a lot. It can reveal a lot about how someone is, um, what someone is going through psychologically and physically. We see changes that happen physically over the course of time through photography, how people age. Yeah, that's one of the beautiful things about photography and film is that um, it has that ability to um, translate the course of time in someone's life, and I like that. I like that photography has that ability, and not only through photography that you can see these types of images, but you can also read about some of the stories and things that they experienced. A lot of bad, some happy times. If you were able to find a way to acclimate to that new lifestyle that they had, and so I dived into that, and so I'm gonna go ahead and forward through some of these paintings so you get a sense of like what I'm kind of talking about here. Um, some of these photographs, some of these photographs I would look at, I do see some of the individuals that are wearing their regalia, but also showing how they had to transform into these new identities as the kind of whitewashing or the kill the Indian, save the man slogan that was kind of like that was kind of thrown upon them by forcing them to leave their homes, and they're in this new lifestyle that was almost um, a new act of survival of the fittest in a way. Um, so these are early paintings that you're seeing from 2017. A lot of these, I use photography a lot to kind of reference everything that you see from them, the imagery, the figures, the posture of the figures, everything that you see as far as figurative elements. And then I did my own variation of color, came up with my own color palette for these that I felt like would kind of coincide with these images pretty well. To at least to the best of my knowledge, the best way I could figure out how to do that. And so you see some examples here, and as the work has evolved, you'll see that they've gradually become a little less rooted in photography. So this one going back to 2016, um, pretty traditional style portrait. They've been like this example right here. You can see that they're a little less rooted in photography and a little bit more stemming from my own imagination and kind of incorporating um, incorporating things that I kind of like can kind of be in the director's chair and kind of, I wouldn't say fictitiously, but like relate it to like stories that I've read or things that I've read about the schools, and associate these interior spaces or exterior spaces or these figures and how these can become narrative paintings, um, but also relate to what was happening there, still coincided with uh, the true histories while making these fictional scenarios through painting. A lot of times I will, because I love filmmaking so much and film history, a lot of times I'll refer to like some film stills and kind of how people navigate, how directors navigate through different scenes and edit different scenes together to kind of like create a narrative through close-ups, through shots that like kind of focus on one or more characters, kind of allowing allowing all the details in the scene to kind of like help with telling the story. And I feel like a lot of a lot of artists that are doing narrative painting do this anyway in their work. It's just a natural thing. It's a natural tendency to kind of like add pieces to kind of like accentuate the storytelling aspect of narrative painting. So I try to do that as much as I can. You can see like some examples here. I actually pulled from a film still one of my favorite movies, Welcome to the Dollhouse from the 1990s, directed by Todd Solondz. I pulled a film still from that and I like just altered it to turn it into a boarding school scene. um, and then some of them just come from like just throwing the paint on canvas and seeing what emerges. Uh, this one would be a prime example of that. I didn't really use a photo reference for this one, but you know, I've seen enough of the photography and enough of the photos of most of those boarding school campuses of what they look like, where I can kind of get a grasp of like how to actually render it without having to look at a tool or a reference in order to make something. So that's what this was, and then this second one was in response to that painting. I made the other one first with her looking away, and I turned it into something where she was actually holding an envelope. If you don't know much about these boarding schools, they were institutions that were introduced to basically to kill the culture from these individuals. It was done to find a way to continuously kill the Indian people after the Indian Wars were completed, and they had taken as much of their land as much of the land as they had wanted. They, as in the United States and Canada and whatever other countries that have dealt with indigenous people, but particularly in the United States and Canada, who had these schools. They did this to do that, but also they understood that these lingering effects that would happen as these youth went to these schools. The message when they first did it was that they were trying to help the native people, but in actuality, they were doing their best to correct their way of life, to turn them into people that were, in their minds, civilized, when in all actuality, the first form of democracy on this soil came from the Haudenosaunee people, which was a form of government that the United States tried their best to pattern itself after. And it's almost impossible to correct someone or correct a culture when you're taking the very root, or you're trying your best to take the very root of what they're doing with their own form of governance. It's a form of hypocrisy that has long rooted in all of the destruction and the evil that has come into this continent. Sorry, I'm being a little militant here, but that's just how I think about things, and it's just how I've been ever since I was a kid and started learning about the histories that happened here. and it's a lot of reason why I make this work. Um, moving on from talking about that, I do like to recognize that there's a lot of artists that I'm indebted to as far as what got me motivated. Not only my professors, but also artists that I look at. I'm a big fan of the early American realists, Alice Neal, Fairfield Porter, Edward Hopper, particularly, and how he portrays loneliness. And I feel like some of his methods. I'm not trying to do exactly what he did, but some of his methods translate in the ways that I like to portray these figures, to portray these characters. And so you might feel like you see some of these paintings. They might remind you of some different painters, but I still try to do my own. Not trying to necessarily have an incredibly unique style. I just paint the way I paint, and what you see is just what just naturally flows out of me. And it might be in response to people I look at, people I just have my taste uh, of the things that I like. It's has helped fashion this work, um, but I try my best to make the work feel as rooted and focus on the individual work and what the message it's trying to portray, rather than the surface and the aesthetics of it, and trying to make something beautiful. I'm not so focused on I'm not so focused on that, even though I think that's important, and making sure that things are done in a way that's does the best job at telling those stories and telling those narratives, or painting these portraits. But um, I'm more interested in the trying my best to capture the essence of these individuals and the spirit of these individuals that I'm trying to portray. You guys have seen several of these, so I'm just gonna skip through some of them. Um, as far as scale, I do like to work usually medium scale. I made some large scale pieces before, like all the way up to 6 by 8 feet. I did most of that in grad school, but as I've been out of grad school, I haven't had the space really at home. So I work primarily small scale, as you guys see with some of these paintings, and I do find that it's kind of a nice medium for me, a nice size for me, to kind of get more images out there, and as opposed to like having to focus and spend days and days on one large canvas. I can do some of these smaller paintings in like a day, or like a couple hours, and I'm done, and I can move on to the next one. Doesn't mean I'm just trying to rush through it. The paintings just it just comes to me a little bit quicker, and um, I'm kind of impatient when I work, so um, the ability to work kind of fast, but at the same time, um, be very efficient with my time is really important, and I think the work just ends up being better, and because of that. Um, and and this is the last slide here. So you see in these last couple images, these are some of my smallest works. I haven't worked any smaller than like 8 by 10. Um, so yeah, doing doing my best to to explain these, or at least talk about these, but it's hard for me to continue talking about them without anybody um, asking me questions and feeling like they want to learn more about it. I feel like I'm kind of like
Yeah, no, you're doing great.
rambling, so
No,
sorry.
no, you're doing perfect. I was just like following where you were going, and I think you provided, it was wonderful, especially to see that progression, as you were saying, from the photographs, and then kind of expanding out and including more of the setting and the landscape. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about, you said briefly that you had learned about these boarding schools as a child. And one thing we haven't really talked about is you're of Pee Dee and Tuscarora descent. Is that something that you learned about from your ancestors and their experiences with boarding schools, or was this part of your education in a different way?
Education in a different way. So here in the Carolinas, uh, our nation's um, so I primarily am familiar with my Tuscarora side. PD I'm affiliated with, and I do know individuals from the community, but I grew up in the Tuscarora community, and that's more of what I identify with. But you know, people in our area assimilated early. We uh, we were some of the first that were contacted. Um, our Tuscarora War was back in 1713 is when our decisive battle took place, and we eventually, migrated to a reservation here in North Carolina um, that was eventually sold, in the late 1800s. But that reservation, and during that time, reservation life it was kind of like a period when there were no boarding schools yet, and the Tuscarora people were assimilating at a rapid rate just from trying to survive. So adopted new ways of living, adopted ways that other Southern communities were trying to survive as well, through you know farming and all of those things, and adapted to contemporary styles and trying to adapt to the white population. Um, my my great grandparents did not go to school. They were not allowed to go to school. Um, Not with white people. And I'm talking primarily with the side that was, I'm talking primarily the side that's from Robeson County, North Carolina. The um, the Tuscarora community in Robeson County, North Carolina. Um, my That's my mother's family that are from Robeson County, and my great grandparents couldn't go to school. It wasn't until 1887 when a school called the Croatan Indian Normal School um, in my hometown was built. It was demanded by the native people because they knew that education was important. Um, no one came and forcibly removed anyone from our area to go to boarding schools because we were already assimilated enough. Um, and So, in a way, that was a privilege, but at the same time, we demanded that we sought education. And it wasn't until when that school was created, you had youth from from children all the way up to 18, and some even older than that were taking classes, and eventually that school led to the first state school in the United States, which turned into Pembroke State College. It was the first four-year school in the 1920s when it was established for Native Americans. It was the first state-supported school, four-year college, and that eventually turned into the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. But So people in my for where I'm from know that education is really important, but the education as far as forcibly removing youth from their reservations was very different. It's something I identified with because our culture has, continually been lost over time. Our language died out at a very early period, even though um, there's individuals that have said that there were still some fluent speakers even back in the 1930s and 40s. Also, we've been on a constant state of revitalization with bringing back the ceremonies and the traditional songs and dances, and that's something that I'm very much a part of. Um, and I'm very indebted to bringing that back and sharing with the future generations so they can keep it going. Um, but um, but these are things that uh, I find that it's very difficult to really get an understanding um, of your culture if you don't get to grow up with it. If you're being forcibly sent away from these to these schools and having to learn and not being able to speak your language, that's something that that was just taken from them. And uh, I feel like it's also a point in history that a lot of people didn't grow up knowing about. I didn't know really about the boarding schools until I got a little bit older, because they didn't talk about it in our schools. We had in my hometown, we did have several individuals that went to Carlisle, but they went. Um, they were given the choice to go. They weren't forcibly taken to go there. They had a choice to go, and they decided they would go. This was back in like 1910 and 1915 or something. Um, and so we did have individuals that did go to that school, but they had the choice if they wanted to go and try it out or not. So
And Marcus, while you were talking about Carlisle, I mean, I imagine many people in our audience, in anticipation of your talk today, if they did
yeah.
not grow up learning, which I did not in my school system as well, like you were sharing, isn't this first painting that you have on the slideshow, is that taken from photographs from the Carlisle School? I was kind of Googling these two individuals, and there were some other, I think, paintings in this particular series that you compiled for us today that I seem to find a record from the Carlisle School. But briefly, can you tell us, my understanding is that the Carlisle School was kind of created as this model that really then was replicated across the US and Canada. And my understanding is that there's currently 523 recorded boarding schools that we know of, that were most of them based off of this Carlisle model. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, yeah, that's correct. Yeah, like Carlisle was the one of the first. It was I think it was around 1879, I believe, when it was first when the first students attended. Um, it wasn't the very first school. There was another one that came about. I think it was in Washington State, if I'm not mistaken. It was even before that one, but they didn't become as widespread until Carlisle, and they definitely patterned themselves after it. Some of them, their focus was not particularly exactly the same as what Carlisle did. As far as Carlisle was called an industrial Indian school, and a lot of times they would put these kids to work. Um, they had them doing a lot of heavy laborious work, and not just having the books out and taking classes and just learning stuff. Um, I mean, I won't get into the abusive things that took place and stuff like that, but that's just in a nutshell, like how they were established, um, and Carlisle was one of the main ones. And yeah, I did pull from a lot of photography from Carlisle because there's a lot of documentation there. And this one particularly, you can see the military style uniforms. Um, these are youth that never served, at least hadn't served in the military, but they're wearing these uniforms in these images, and oftentimes you see them, and Um, and it's kind of confusing if you learn a bit about the backstory of like the fact that they um, the fact that they are uh, placed in these schools and given these types of clothing to wear, but they're actually just young children who have never experienced that type of lifestyle that the military brings. So
And in
yeah,
the second image, the woman you have painted is she's so my understanding too is that there was sometimes taken like a before and after photo, like once a child was admitted into the school and then after they were then like forced to wear these uniforms. So do you know the story behind the woman in that second painting, and if what she's wearing and the length of her hair, was that considered maybe like a before she was fully forced into the clothing and the style of that education?
honestly, I cannot remember what the year was for this, but as the years progressed, I will say it could be a Bork 4 photo. I'll say that. Um, as the years progressed, the the amount of um, the amount of times that they were the idea of them showing and wearing and in respect to their culture, wearing some of their traditional clothing. It seemed like it was allowed gradually, but um, early on when Carlisle first was established, like they took their clothing, they broke their necklaces, they cut their hair, they did all these things. I mean, you see it evolve just like things evolve over time. But um, none of that really affects the way that none of that really affects like the root of the situation that these schools were established in the first place and what their intentions were. But yeah, I don't know a whole lot about her. Honestly, I saw her name. I saw her name and I titled it based on her name, and I loved the way that she um, her image was expressed in a photograph. So those are things that I gravitated to. Um, and But yeah, it's been so long. I might have seen what year, or if it was before and after, but I just can't remember with that particular one.
Oh, no worries. It was just, I was really struck by her outfit, and yeah, that was just mostly I was curious to kind of share that bit of history with our audience about this. Again, thinking about photography and how it was used, the photographers were obviously white people, right, who were part of the schooling system. Were there instances like whose camera is looking, like who's taking these photographs? Do you know anything about the photographers in that process, because that lens matters, like who's documenting these
Lens
people?
definitely matters. I'm sure a lot of photographers were non-native, because most of the teachers and most of the staff, most of the people that were running these schools were non-native. Um, but honestly, what's interesting is like even while these schools were around, some of the photography that was made was often done in ways to kind of like market for the schools, make the schools look good, and they even sold some of the photography as postcards, um, almost as a way of commodifying the idea of the American Indian as a product um, that could be bought and sold, which has oftentimes been done throughout history. But that's just another way that happened. And of course, like through the lens of a photographer, is oftentimes told in their viewpoints. Um, and and yeah, but even through that, I feel like I can still use these photographs in some way, even though they're taken um, through the lens of someone who's like has a colonizer's mindset.
If you would go to slide number 5, I'm really interested in that one.
That's right.
Yeah, unidentified male. And you were talking a little bit about the revitalization that you're involved with your community. And I wondered, like through documentaries and just what little I've tried to like research, this idea of like unmarked graves or this like beyond the language and things that are lost. I didn't know if there was anything else in terms of this revitalization that you're part of. What are those spaces of erasure, like anything you want to share about that revitalization project that you're part of that is both really encouraging or maybe disheartening, like any part of that you'd like to share?
Um, when I talk about revitalization, it's mostly to bring back things that were lost in my community. So among the Tuscarora people here, we're a nation of people that have constantly been refused recognition in our state, also by the government. There is a Tuscarora Nation in New York that is recognized by the federal government, but the ones that are descendants of those that stayed in North Carolina can't even receive recognition by the state. But hopefully that will change very soon. But we are like I grew up as a child, as a youth, ever since I could walk. I've been dancing our traditional social dances. Um, it was in the late 1980s when we had some individuals come from New York, from several of the Iroquois territories up in New York, and they came down and they started to work with some of our people to bring back the culture, um, bring back the style of regalia that was worn, because a lot of that stuff had just become lost because we over time we tried our best, the people in North Carolina, even though we didn't ever lose our identity as Native people, we all lost our identity as a people who lived as Native people, through speaking our languages, doing our songs, our ceremonies that are all based around the seasons. So we had to relearn all that stuff, and that's one thing that I'm trying to do is to help the youth relearn these things. Every Monday night, I drive to our Tuscarora Nation territory, and we have a dance class, and I help lead some of the songs, and we run through that. We spend like an hour and a half every Monday night, and that's just one way that I can kind of give back to my community, in whatever way I can see fit. And we do more than just a dance class. We just had our our powwow that we've had going on for years. We just had that back in May. We do things like that, but we also do socials and ceremonies. We try to carry those forward, and that's a way to continuously revitalizing the culture, so it becomes a state of normalcy, for our people rather than something that is something new. We want it to be a tradition. We want it to become a tradition that's expected and not like not learned. Um,
How has it impacted your art making at all to be in part of the singing and the dancing? You were talking about moving from like photography to more narrative and your influence of film, but has being like those weekly gatherings, has that changed what you or how you approach your paintings?
As far as the visual arts concerned, I think they're connected in some way. Um, I don't necessarily know exactly how, but I know they're connected in how in my thought process and how like um I become interested in portraying certain characters one day to the next. Um, how I want my scenes to the scenes that I paint to um, to look and feel, and how I want them to um, convey a certain message or an emotion. Um, I'm sure it does affect that, but oftentimes it's kind of like an in the moment thing. Like when I'm working and something, I have an idea for something. Like say I want to do something that's like boxing scene or baseball um, or I want to do something that's involving uh, following a character navigating through their way through the hallways of a school or something. It's just something that I have on my mind, um, and I feel like it would be interesting visually uh, to kind of follow through with that and to tell um, and to kind of like use my imagination to allow that to come to life. A lot of times I don't know how they're gonna really turn out from when I start to finish, but uh, oftentimes I find a way to get through it, and the end result, you know, you know, kind of magically appears, and that's so I can't say it's directly influenced by what I do with trying to help progress the culture in any way, but um, I'm sure it's I'm sure it influences my interest and keeps me engaged in continuing this practice.
Mhm. Before we open it up to questions, I would like, can you take us to the message 1 and 2? Because I think that's an interesting moment where we have, um, yeah, I'm curious, like, since we get to talk to the artist and you're here, what happens in this figure turning around for you? Like, I really love, like, as a characteristic of your paintings, like being behind, and especially having spent time in the galleries with several of the one that we have here on view. There's something about like getting closer and not really being able to see their face or to see what they're seeing. Can you say a little bit about like this messenger and then messenger two, like what's happening for you narratively with the
Sure.
turning of their body?
Yeah, I I feel like oftentimes we think of someone navigating through life. You can kind of like put yourself in their shoes. You don't see their face, so it removes a little bit of their identity. At the same time, it allows you to not only put yourself in their place where you become that individual and your identity takes over, and whether a space like is descriptive or not so descriptive as like this one, not necessarily, you can still um, find a way to relate to this imagery. You might find a way to put yourself in their shoes for a change and see yourself like walking through this path. Um, that's exactly how I feel when I'm watching some of my favorite filmmakers' movies, Stanley Kubrick or Paul Thomas Anderson um, or Darren Aronofsky, Sophia Coppola. Oftentimes they might use some of these like steady cam shots where you're like navigating through a place with them, almost documentary style. Um, and in a way, like being able to do this is almost like you're walking along the path with them, and you start to empathize with that person a little bit more. Um, Oftentimes, when you see someone from front like this, it's almost like it just becomes about them, and it doesn't allow you to really dive into it so much. So that's kind of what kind of drives me to do work that do paintings that are they're like that. Um, yeah. Some people might feel other things from them, or it might cause them to feel like it might be in response to other things. And I'm sure there are other things. It's just all I can think of right now that makes me want to make those types of images. Again, I'm not like super crafty and like I mean I do sketches. I do preliminary sketches leading up to these paintings, but I'm not super crafty as far as like knowing that, oh, this is why I'm going to frame it this way, or this is why I'm going to see them from this perspective or that. Um, it's just whatever seems interesting at the time. So
That's wonderful. Thank you. I mean, that's what's so great, right, about art is it's just like reading about like, working with paint, it's faster, it's intuitive, it's immediate was something I read that you had said about like your choice of using paint. And also, like you look at it and you just like feel it. And I think as a viewer in discussions with different people in the galleries, like some of the things that you've said, they've also felt those things as well. We'll give people a moment if they want to type anything into the live chat. I'm monitoring that starting now. So if anyone has anything that they would like to add, I will then read that to Marcus. So I'll keep my eye on that. I noticed that you jumped to this slide. Is there something you'd like to say about that one?
oh, I just pulled it up because that one's also showing there, right?
Yes.
Okay. I just pulled it up because it was another like from behind
Oh
painting.
yeah.
Seeing someone sitting on the bed, and you don't see their face. So I just pulled it up because of that. But yeah, kind of a trend in my work. So I
I love that too, and especially like these interior scenes, like the classroom and the bedroom, like having that little glimpse of the outdoors out there, but it's like one of the smaller elements of the painting. Like even if something isn't a landscape, like even the messenger one, like the mountain is so far away. Like there's always this kind of like distancing that I'm seeing in some of these. If there is an outdoor landscape, there's kind of a distance there. At least that's how I'm seeing it, which kind of gives that like for me like that longing, like loneliness feeling.
yeah, no, yeah, and it also I don't know. I think for me, um, it allows me to being able to these create these spaces. Allows me to kind of like find a way to kind of like break up the monotony of the design. I really I think of ways like I'm rooted in like really trying to show and highlight these individuals, these characters as people, and people that people can figures that people can relate to. But it also allows me to like find other ways and other outlets um, for the mind to wander, as opposed to just like focusing on and like relying on the figure to carry them uh, to this kind of like uh, this this other space. I feel like the characters and the people, the figures, actually they do a lot and they say a lot, but the space around them has a way to like kind of like that brings them in, but the spaces around them like carry them on a journey in a way. And I think that's something I try my best to find a way to do that.
Mhm. No, it is really special, especially like, you know, even this with like the night sky, you know, out there, and maybe that's like a star, maybe that's some type of airplane, you know, it's just like what that path, yeah, I like that a lot. So I know that it's not because people don't have questions. I really
Oh, that's
fall
cool.
the
It's
where
all
I'm sorry
good.
everyone who's attending that this is such a weird week with the technology, and I know it has been really wonky. And so hopefully as we gather this series, there'll be more funding to actually bring people in person. But it's been really great to have Marcus give his time today. And as just a follow-up, how can people, you know, stay in touch with your work and kind of follow what's the latest stuff happening with you?
Sure, yeah. My Instagram is the easiest. It's probably what I like, uh, you know, get the most information out there pertaining to any of the art that I'm doing. I am having a show next month, but it's, I haven't like I haven't gotten an a flyer or something that I can really share, like a shareable like um, image or anything. But like that's one thing that's coming up. But I'll probably have that shared on my Instagram soon. But my Instagram, my name, Marcus Dunn, but in between my first and last name, there's 2 underscores. So Marcus 2 underscores Dunn is my handle. Other than that, um, yeah, I'm trying to I'm trying my best to continue, you know, my craft and continue painting, and so, um, but at the same time, along with that, I like to um, I like to be able to share my culture as well. So I do attend a lot of powwows. So if you're ever on the powwow trail, and I may end up being there. If you go to the different Native American powwows around the southeast, especially Carolinas and Virginia and South Carolina, I try to go to a good bit of those. So, but yeah, um, that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Well, Marcus, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for all of you who joined in. We did have a nice gathering on our YouTube live, so I really
Awesome,
appreciate you. Thank you so much.
awesome. Thank you,
Take care.
and you too. Thank you. Bye.